Well, I'll tell you who's not hot, and that's Matt Harvey. He's on the hot seat, that's for sure. Admitting he was feeding Tyler Skaggs some prescription drugs when he was with the Angels. Speedy, you're a big baseball fan. When you heard this story, and you're a big Met fan, he was once called the Dark Knight. Now he's going to be called the Dark Dirt because that's where he's heading. He's going to be heading down and deep, 6 feet under, and he might not be playing baseball anymore for any major league team, especially hearing this story.
Yeah, his fall from grace with the Mets at the end of his career to what he's become even off the field too. So this kind of thing, not surprising based off of that kind of thing. Obviously, the drugs were being administered at first from Eric Kay, who's now been indicted in that case. He's going to be sentenced to a minimum 20 years in prison now with that, the Angels communications director. But Matt Harvey also was encouraging Tyler Skaggs to also take some of the other drugs he'd gotten. A lot of things I never even heard of too, from painkillers and opioids, but even some of these new foreign drugs that I never even heard of. But there's a whole thing with that too. And if Matt Harvey's being the one encouraging that kind of thing, he's going to get suspended. And it seems like, based on a report that came out a couple days ago, that he will be suspended for the whole season from what it seems like. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they do end up having a season. So Matt Harvey's definitely in a whole lot of trouble with that. Obviously, Kay's going to be the one prosecuted with that because he was also giving the drugs in addition to Harvey, to Tyler Skaggs, to Cam Bedrosian, to Blake Parker, who are all pitchers, Mike Moran, another pitcher, and CJ Cron, who was the first base DH now with the Angels, now with the Rockies, I believe. So a lot of these other players, and who knows what other figures in that organization were covering up this kind of thing too. The Angels, we know, is dysfunctional from a baseball standpoint. They don't know how to build a team. They don't know how to make trades. They give out such terrible contracts. And now, from a covering up a potential scandal like this, who knows if there's any front office executives, ex-GMs, the
how about great players like Mike Trout involved with it?
And now the other end of this too, who says this kind of thing doesn't force these other players to demand a trade now too? The Angels, a lot of people have been saying they should trade Mike Trout anyway, just to rebuild and try to get as much as you can. And
I'm one of them.
Now with Shohei Ohtani winning MVP, who says he's going to want to stay there too. He might demand himself out too of amidst of this whole scandal if it does loom larger, if there's guys in this organization that create a stench if they were cover up for Kay.
It's a big dirty fart. That's what I would say. And Harvey's going to be sitting at the end of the fart because it's going to be burning a hole in his stomach. This is horrible. It's going to really hit hard. You talk about where this team was at one point. They won a World Series. This was an organization with Vladimir Guerrero at one point and so much talent. And you have Mike Trout, arguably the best player in all of baseball, one of the best players we've ever seen. And now you look at this team. Where is this team at? Where is this ownership at? And management, this is a complete disgrace. You look at the season, and right now they're trying to figure things out. There's so much going on trying to negotiate deals, especially for the rookie contracts and arbitrating and paying these players before arbitration. Minor league deals where minor league players should be making more money. I mean, they're making like $50,000 a year. They're trying to boost it up to a little bit over $100,000 or $150,000, where these players can actually be making some kind of money to support a family. Playing in the minor leagues for 10 years, and you're making $50,000 a year and traveling around. You can't support a family like that. You can't even have a family. So it's so interesting on a way baseball is figuring this out and how they're going to move forward. And I wouldn't bet that this is going to be good because you have a stupid commissioner running that organization in Rob Manfred. And could we please have 2024 sooner than later? Because that's when Rob Manfred's contract is up, and maybe Theo Epstein can take over, somebody that actually knows what he's doing.
Maybe Rob Manfred and the Angels organization will both be forced out.
I hope so, because Rob Manfred has just made this game into a joke. And now they're talking about bringing in 14 teams in the playoffs. It's ridiculous. How about we have 22 teams in the playoffs? That would be great. We'll have a round robin. It's ridiculous. You work so hard. You play for a full season. And I remember there were teams in the 80s, teams that would win 100 games and wouldn't make the playoffs.
Right.
Now, all of a sudden, if you win 88 games, you can make the playoffs.
Oh, was it a shortened season like 1981 with the lockout of that year? The Reds were like a 100-win pace or close to 100 wins, and they didn't get in the playoffs, and somehow the Dodgers got in instead for whatever reason.
It is absolutely ridiculous. Rob Manfred has ruined the game right in front of our eyes. The DH in the National League, that should have been implicated or brought into the game a long time ago. It protects the pitchers because I always thought the American League had the advantage with the DH. Now it helps out some of the older players in the National League, some of the players that are not good positional players, defensive positional players where they can play every day and hit every day. It should have been brought into the National League. I know a lot of people don't like it because they like the old style of game, but the game is completely different when it comes to that, with these pitchers throwing 100 miles per hour and playing every fifth day, and they're throwing every single pitch. They're throwing between 95 and 100 miles per hour. Your arms are going to go. And then you got to hit. You trip on your own feet going to first base or second. It's not not safe. And that's why I think this should have been brought into the National League quicker. Besides some of the other rules, I think that there should be some kind of negotiation, and it should be moving faster and sooner than later.
From a strategy standpoint, I always like the difference in the both leagues. I actually think it makes the interleague and the World Series strategy very interesting. But now you're seeing teams in general just build more depth as a whole anyway, where teams are rotating players, playing the matchups, situational hitting, stuff like that, even with just everyday lineups. So the pure DH is not really the same kind of thing anymore. You're going to have different guys platoon into DH spots if you have enough roster depth, which a lot of the top teams do now. It's not really as much of a top-heavy star. You have to have 3 stars, and then you could get away with 6 iffy hitters. It's more of a balanced team. Look at the way the Braves won. They had all the depth in the outfield, the infield, 30 home runs or near 30 home run guys. The Dodgers now, look at all the depth they build, and that's the way to win now in today's game. You don't really win as much with the stars, and then you could just get away with everything else, kind of like you saw with the Giants and other teams like that had a couple key pieces, and then they just changed them. And the DH in both leagues now will reflect that.
Yeah, that's why I think as we move further in the negotiations, and I mean further because they're slowly moving, hopefully they move a lot faster because there are stories coming out that the players want a 162-game season. I can't see it happen. To finish up these negotiations, this has to be cleaned up in the next 2 to 3 weeks. If it isn't, you're going to miss games because you got to go through spring training. These pitchers are going to have to get their reps, and these hitters are going to have to get their reps. You can't just go into the season and say, hey, we're going to just play in games. This is how players get hurt. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and these players get a lot of money, and they're guaranteed. It's not like the NFL where the only guarantee is a signing bonus. This is all guaranteed money. You're talking about Mike Trout that's making $400 million. If he gets hurt, like he's been getting hurt, you're losing about $39 million a year where he's sitting on his ass and he's racking in the money. You don't want to see that. So I think baseball needs to protect their players, and they need to move this further and faster so these players can get on the field. Hockey, there's really nothing to say much about the Islanders except they got to keep winning. They're so far behind. I think they're 16 points out of a playoff spot. They have to hope that Boston loses a significant amount of games. They got to lose 4 or 5 games in a row, and the Islanders got to win 8 to play catch up with them. And being that there's only 32 games left in the season, it's still a significant amount of games. That's not saying much. And the Islanders have not gotten on one of these rolls where you see them win 5, 6, 7, 8 games in a row. They've won a game, they've lost a game, they've won a game, they lost a game, they win 2 games, they lose 3 games. They're not on those streaks where you could say, oh, this team can catch the Rangers, this team can catch the Washington Capitals. I really don't see it.
Yeah, they only have 4 games at hand right now in comparison to what they had at certain points of the season now. 16 points they've got to make up with the Bruins. Now, the Bruins, they have been rumored they might consider at the right price trading some of their older players and consider selling because they do need to get goaltending help badly because Tuukka Rask now re-retired and their other young guys, they've been good at certain points, but still, that could maybe open the door if they do end up selling some pieces. But, again, it's still going to be unlikely as a whole because they still have a nice core there that has been competitive at certain points. In terms of the Islanders, they're in a weird spot when it comes to making a trade because they have all these veteran pieces that they could try to deal just to get some draft picks for that haven't worked out. Parise, Chara, guys like that. I don't know how much value they're going to have. But they're also in a position, though, too, with all the young players, the talent that they have in their farm system where they can still try to buy as well. If another team is reluctant to make a big trade like that, they might end up getting beneficiary of a good young piece. Vancouver's been selling a lot of pieces. Buffalo's obviously going to be selling a lot of pieces. The Flyers it seems like are on a full-blown fire sale, so maybe they could take advantage of one of those types of teams too. Montreal.
There could be a lot of options for the New York Islanders, and Lou Lamoriello is not going to sit put. They're a player or two offensively away from winning a Stanley Cup. I think offensively. They need to figure that out. Defensively this year, they haven't been as good, but they're not playing bad hockey. I think their defense is getting back to 100% healthy. I know the way the Rangers are playing right now, Islander fans are being skeptical about Barry Trotz. Please, guys, could we stop? It's horrible how you read social media that people think that Barry Trotz should be on a hot seat.
Oh, come on.
It's ridiculous. Why? Because Gallant right now is winning with the Rangers. You think that he's been a better option for the Rangers. Listen, teams don't know how Gallant has played, because he hasn't been coaching in the NHL for a couple of years. He takes over a team that has talent, and they're playing good hockey. Do I think the Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup? No. Crazy things have happened before. If their goaltending gets hot, their defense plays better, yeah, the Rangers could win the Stanley Cup.
If Montreal could get to the Stanley Cup, anybody can at this rate.
Yeah. So is it possible? Yeah. Do Islander fans excited about the Rangers possibly going to a Stanley Cup? Probably not. But the Islanders have their chances, and they're still going to have their chance. They're still a fairly young team. They got a lot of their veteran players that are going to be coming back next year. I think that if they start the season actually playing home games next year, the Islanders will be a dangerous team next year. I really do believe it. I think they have good goaltending. I think Sorokin is going to be a fantastic goalie. I was talking to Dan Rizicki. He was taking shots at Sorokin.
Of course he was.
He was saying that Sorokin is not as good as everybody says he is. And da-da-da-da-da. Lerner was a better goaltender when he was here. I mean, this kid is a young kid. He says, well, he's not young. He's 26 years old. He's young in the NHL, okay? This is his second year. Is his first full year as an Islander. Okay?
And Leonard's also injury-prone, too. He's hurt right now as we speak. So.
I just think it's ridiculous. I think that the Islanders moving forward are going to have to figure out what they're going to be next year more than what they can do in trying to get into the playoffs this year. Is it a possibility? Yeah. If one of these teams get hurt, one of these players, one of their top two players get hurt, it's a possibility. If Boston, they beat the Boston Bruins the other day, it's a possibility. I don't think they have that many games left against Boston. So I think that they're out of luck when it comes to that, but who knows? I'm willing to bet that the chances of the Islanders making the playoffs are like 70-30. 70 no, 30 yes. And that's not good odds, okay? No. It's not good odds. So if you're an Islander fan, are you buyers or sellers? I would sell. There are players that you could move. Parisi, Chara, Paul Mary, maybe if you don't think he fits moving forward. Maybe you trade Paul Mary.
One of their second-line guys, too. You could definitely explore Villiers or Nelson or one of those guys, too.
Or Bailey, somebody like that, and bring in some new blood to this team and see if it'll benefit helping out Barzal, who, let's be honest, again, it's another year, another lost year for Barzal because you did not put another player around him that's going to help them win. They don't have another superstar young player that could stay and keep up with this kid and play at the top of their game. So maybe the Islanders figure that out.